Welcome everybody to the 13th PAVE Europe virtual panel and the first one of this year. My name is Guido Di Pasquale. I'm Managing Director at PAVE Europe. And what best to start the new year with a topic that is central for the PAVE mission, which is public engagement. So today we are having a conversation about public engagement, and we will also try to chart the road ahead for AVs. But not only, we will talk about human factors influencing design and consideration for human-machine interface, interaction of all road users, so users of vehicles and non-users of vehicles with the new technologies, and how to integrate AVs into our daily life. We talk about ethical considerations and diverse perspectives from the communities and how also the community expectations could impact the evolution of the technology. And of course, we will also tackle a broader vision for the future of transport and mobility with the recent experience as well from EU large-scale demonstration on AVs. We have three amazing panelists. I'm very happy for that, with exceptional expertise in autonomous vehicles technology and mobility in general. Henriette Cornet, autonomous mobility expert. Hello, Henriette.
Hello, everybody.
We have Nick Reed, founder at Reed Mobility and Chief Road Safety Advisor at National Highways in UK. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Guido. Hi, everyone.
And welcome, Natasha Merat, Professor of Human Factors and Transport Systems at Institute for Transport Study at the University of Leeds in UK. Hello, Natasha. So welcome. Well, let's start with an introduction from yourself. I introduced you, but I would like to hear from you what do you do and what's your role, and also your link or connection to the AV space. Let's start with Henriette.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Guido, for the introduction and also for the invitation. I'm very happy to speak at PAVE. So yeah, my name is Henriette Cornet. I am an engineer and I work for the automotive industry, so passionate about transport in general. And also I made a shift after a few years at the automotive industry to public transport. It's really like at the core of my work for the past years. And the last 7 years I've been working in Singapore at Research Institute on industrial design of AVs for public transport. And then I moved to Europe mainly for the coordination of this very large-scale project, which is SHOW, that I coordinated for around 3 years. And there it was really less about research, but more about like putting the vehicles on the ground, testing them, demonstrating them in mini cities. I will come back to that. And now I've moved to US, so I continue my travel over continents. I moved to US and I'm now in a kind of, let's say, a writing break where I want to wrap up a bit what I've learned these past years. So yeah, I'm sitting down here and it's early, but I'll do my best to to deliver to the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Henriette. Nick, your turn.
Yes, thank you, Guido. And again, thank you for the invitation and for all the good work that PAVE and PAVE Europe has been doing in engaging on this topic. Yeah, my background is in psychology and human factors. I worked for many years at TRL, Transport Research Laboratory. And there, my passion was really around road safety and looking at, the effects of alcohol, drugs, fatigue, and new technologies on driver behavior. And with the DARPA challenges and Google's self-driving car project, realized the massive impact that automated driving could have on safety. So that's where my career path took me. I led many large-scale demonstration projects of automated vehicles. Then had a couple of years with Bosch as their head of mobility R&D. And for the last 5 years, I've been working independently through my company, Reed Mobility. Most of my work relates to the safety of connected and automated vehicles. But as you rightly mentioned, I also have this role with National Highways, the Strategic Road Authority for England, as their independent chief road safety advisor. So helping them to navigate towards their Vision Zero ambition.
Thank you, Nick. And Natasha, what about you?
Thank you. And again, thanks from me as well for including me in this panel. I'm also a psychologist. I don't want to say I'm the female version of Nick, because that would be weird, but yes. It's actually 30 years this year since I started working in Leeds, or as a PhD student, looking at users' interactions with the car and new technologies. And for the last 18 or so years, I've been focusing on automated vehicles. So looking at both drivers' interactions inside the car using our driving simulator that you can see behind me, but also at pedestrians' interactions with automated vehicles. That started in the City Mobile 2 project, which was funded by the European Commission, looking at real-world trials, kind of like what's now led to what Henriette was doing, and the sort of automated pod-like vehicles, but also recently using our pedestrian simulator to see how people interact with these vehicles and what kind of communication needs they have. So most of my projects are funded by the European Commission, and I'm currently leading a sub-project of the HyDrive project, which is a 40-partner project where we are looking at users in all capacities, also looking at how comfortable automated vehicles are, and whether or not driver monitoring systems can help in terms of improving their safety. And I can say a little bit more about that when we actually kick off. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Actually, I would like to start with you with my questions, because just to set the scene a bit, because one of the challenges of AV adoption is the user understanding, of course, and how the user understand this technology and the perception they have on autonomous vehicles, which of course leads to the important role of public engagement. So how do we engage with the people and with the citizens in general? And the issue is that there are also not so many autonomous vehicles around, at least in Europe, which makes it difficult to educate and engage people. So I'm interested in your views and research about public understanding and engagement, and also how human factors influence AV design, and according to your studies and your research.
Thank you. Yes, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, saying it's very difficult to do when there's not that many real sort of, on a large scale automated vehicles around. Obviously, there's a lot of testing happening in the UK, Europe, and beyond at different levels. So one of the things is to make sure that we're talking about the right type of vehicle. When we say autonomous or driverless or self-driving, whatever we want to call it, I think the first thing I say is, what are we talking about? Are we talking about what we call a level 2 vehicle, where they are actually available? So there is some control of the vehicle in terms of what speed it holds, whether or not it will crash into the vehicle in front of it because it's got ACC, and whether or not it can keep its lane. Some of that is already available in our vehicles, all the way up to, I would say, level 4. I don't think they're level 5 yet. This is SAE categorization, where they don't have any of the traditional vehicle controls. There's no steering wheel, there's no pedals. There is, it's a sort of more like a pod, sort of public transport bus type vehicle. There may or may not be a safety driver. And of course, anyone who's enthusiastic in this area knows about the robo-taxis model, where it's kind of a combination of the two. So they're more of a private vehicle, like your Waymos and your Cruisers, where there isn't anyone inside the vehicle, and they take you from A to B. So the first thing in terms of public education is really understanding what is the capability of the vehicle, what does it do, what does it not do. And for the work that I've been doing on the driver side is making sure they understand what is their responsibility. So we are sort of on the cusp of level 2 versus level 3 SAE for these private vehicles. So basically for level 2, they are expected to monitor and supervise at all times. And for level 3, they are not required to monitor and supervise, but they are expected to take control when requested. So from the research side of things, this is a very interesting area in terms of monitoring what people do, making sure they get the right information at the right time, in human-machine interface gives them the right information, and so on. And then I'm just going to quickly go, because I am aware of time, and I think I've only got 5 minutes, just to say something about the pedestrian side of things. So now we're looking at pedestrians interacting with vehicles which may or may not be fully in control of the automation, so to speak. So there might be someone in the driver's seat, but they are not in control. That's the sort of future level 4. Or the driver might even be looking behind them, because it's a fully sort of, it's not a typical vehicle. And here we are looking at external interfaces. So instead of the drivers kind of saying, yes, you can go, or flashing the car or whatever, what does that automated vehicle need to do to have that communication with the pedestrian, so that there isn't a standoff, so that when they come across each other, they know what they're doing, who's going first, that kind of thing. And that's a whole other area which I'm not going to go into unless you ask me more questions about it. So that was just an overview to say this is what we're doing, and there is a lot still to be understood in terms of the technology, that we can then make sure the users, the public, understand what the capabilities of the system are and what their responsibilities are. That's the biggest question.
Thank you very much, Natasha. And this introduced me to the question that I have for Nick, because Nick, you published a study very recently, and the title of this study is intriguing me, actually, because it says self-driving but guided by people. So how to make automated vehicles ethical. So could you elaborate a bit on this, and what was the approach of your study, and the challenge of establishing societal preferences for the ethical basis of AV operation, and what were the findings of this study?
Yes, Guido. Yeah, absolutely. It's the flip side of what Natasha was describing. So Natasha was describing how we can make vehicles behave intuitively for the public, for other road users. This is thinking about, what do the traveling public want from this technology? What do they want from vehicles that are capable of driving for themselves? It was funded by the Rhys Jefferies Road Fund, which is a charity in the UK, and we work with several partners. And the origin of the study comes from some work I did as a member of the expert panel the European Commission pulled together to produce recommendations on the ethics of connected and automated vehicles. Those recommendations were published in 2020. One of them was about rule breaking and how you would optimize an automated vehicle so that it would know if it were optimal to break a rule of the road in order to maximize safety. What are the conditions under which that would be permissible? This is a really challenging topic for developers to understand how to program their vehicles to potentially break rules to maximize safety. And in building on that, that recommendation, we wrote a paper, colleagues from myself and colleagues from TNO, from Jaguar Land Rover, and from Flinders University in Australia, about how you would underpin that decision-making process. And we came up with the idea of, or applying the idea of an ethical goal function. And that would be kind of societally derived priorities that the automated vehicle would observe when driving. But the question we didn't answer in the paper was, how do you come up with the ethical goal function? We sort of pushed the challenge one step further back. How do you then come up with this ethical goal function? So the project was to engage with members of the public to ask them what were their priorities about the operation of self-driving vehicles. In this case, we had the use case of self-driving buses operating in an urban environment. So we did a survey. We asked 2,000 people to rate their level of agreement with a number of statements. These weren't kind of trolley dilemmas. There were a couple of examples. I would not expect a self-driving vehicle to break the rules of the road to avoid holding up traffic. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? Or it is acceptable for self-driving vehicles to crash sometimes as long as they are safer than human drivers. Level of agreement with that statement. Some of them, there were clear-cut answers. Some of them that much more varied in the way people respond. In fact, that was one of the interesting things, that for every question, there were always one or two respondents who would be at either end of the level of agreement with the statement. So I think it's fair to say we're not going to be able to please all of the people all the time when we deploy these vehicles. But using that, we built on the results of the survey to go into a deep dive workshops with members of the public. And the concept that seemed most important was trust. And that's unsurprising, but we could understand what elements go to build trust in the operation of an automated vehicle. And there were 4 principles. So that they should be at least as safe as a competent human driver, that there should be a legal framework surrounding the operation of those vehicles, that data should be shared with regulators so that they can assess the safety of those vehicles. And there was a sort of an understanding that incidents would occur, but when they do occur, we should share data so that we can learn from those incidents and make sure they don't happen again. So that seems to be the principles that would underpin trust and ethical operation of self-driving vehicles. Now, we need to start to quantify that, because it's all very well understanding the principles, but if you're a developer or regulator, you need to be able to quantify what that means in terms of the behavior of the vehicle. So we have some ideas about how to do that next, perhaps using simulation to give people more immersive experiences of operating with, being in an environment with self-driving vehicles. But that might help us to get to this kind of quantification of the ethical goal function, which developers and regulators can use to optimize the behavior of self-driving vehicles.
Thank you very much, Nick. This is crucial for PAVE's Europe mission, of course, and how to build this trust. And yeah, thanks a lot. It's a very important study. And now I would like to go on the field with Henriette. Well, I just noticed that this day, 31st of January, 4 years ago, I had the pleasure to kick off the SHOW project, which was one of the lighthouse or large-scale demonstration projects that we had in Europe, and that Henriette then conducted and led to success. So I would like to ask you, after these 4 years of experience with SHOW and with deployment of autonomous vehicles in so many different cities in Europe, also based on what Natasha and Nick said on public engagement, what were the challenges to deploy these vehicles from different points of view, of course, technological, but not only technological, I assume. So what is your return on experience after these 4 years? Especially for the public transport sector, and especially in view of integrating AVs into the public transport network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Guido, and really, it goes very well with what I've been said before, from starting with really from the people, understanding their reaction to the vehicles, through all the surveys, the workshops that we need to talk to them, and also on the other side, kind of putting the vehicles on the ground. And that was done in SHOW with this. We deployed, and some of these demonstrations are still ongoing in different countries, but we deployed 70 AVs in 13 European countries. So that's very unique. That's huge when you think about it, not only from a European project perspective, but actually worldwide. This hasn't been done anywhere in the world, to have this really public transport integrated vehicle, so to say, and not only private fleets or and so on. Also very unique in the project, and it goes directly in this idea of public. It was like on open roads. That was central. That is central in the project. That was central in the project. that it was not a test situation. It was really providing a service in many of the cities, really answering a travel demand that was there, where there was a lack of public transport between 2 points. I'm thinking of Frankfurt, where there was a retirement home and a grocery store, where there was definitely lack of transport there, and the challenge for public transport was putting a bus would not have been possible in the narrow streets, and it would have been way too expensive. And then kind of naturally having shuttles, low-speed shuttles was kind of ideal there. And so it was really this real life, and also having the opportunity to to demonstrate, to run the vehicles for many months. So it was always between 6 and 9 months, and that's why some of the demonstrations are still running. It was great because people got used to these vehicles. It was part of their daily life. It was not this type of mindset where you go and you are in a test situation and after you are asked, but people were using it on their daily travel, let's say. Maybe commute will be too much, but let's say for whatever need they had for this, depending on the cities. And yeah, we unlocked, so it was many challenges. As you see, there were challenges, definitely on the technical side, as you said, and this leads also to the aspect of that we need more robust vehicles, and everybody knows that. We need fleets. So it was difficult if we had some issue with vehicles, it was difficult to replace them. We had issue also with some bankruptcy of partners, stuff like that. And yeah, there is no many fleets on the market, no many robust vehicles, but it's coming. I'm very hopeful. So that will come. But the biggest challenge maybe was on the regulation side and getting the permit. It took us a long time, maybe also because we started during COVID. So it was very hard to move on with administration there. But there again, since we deployed in 13 countries, it was great to discover in all these different places all the regulations and how to get the permits. And in some of the countries, it was the first time that the vehicles, that any AV service was deployed. So that was also very positive, I would say. And yeah, it was really pre-commercial. Another things I can say about kind of the success of the project, and after I'm happy to dig more into detail, was the fact that it was pre-commercial, meaning that some of the demonstrations in some of the cities want to pursue after the project. And this is, of course, for the funding agencies or European Commission, the best, when the money that they put in place is after use to continue after the project. And this will happen in some of the cities. So SHOW is really kind of the border between research and commercial or pre-commercial deployment. So that's the best to get in touch with real people, I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Henriette. Did you have any experience with public engagement at the end in the cities?
Yes, a lot, definitely. There was different mechanisms put in place from the project itself, meaning I would say the traditional surveys that we do, before a ride, after a ride, and there it's still we are still analyzing. The researchers involved in that are still analyzing the results. There was a concept of ideathon. We did several ideathon, and I think it's also nice for me, this type of mechanism or tool is very good because you take more time. You take more time to get into discussions and to really extract kind of from the creativity that everybody has finally. We have also focus group discussions, also targeting different groups, something with, I know in Sweden, they did a lot with children, for example. So that was very interesting to target different groups. But again, for me, the strongest public engagement was made with real passengers that were talking all the time with the safety drivers. So the safety drivers in the project are the essence of the information from the connection with the public. We are also collecting their own findings. So there will be also reports on what the safety drivers have kind of collected, the information they have collected. And for me, that's incredible how people react to vehicle. And when we come as experts, as researchers into the field, we have assumption on how people may react to that. And after, when we talk to the safety driver, asking what they have collected, it may be very different from a type of I would say, how some people found the technology extremely normal and non-surprising at all, as long as it works, of course. As always, with public transport, right? As long as it works, nobody talks about it.
Yeah.
So I think that will be exactly the same for autonomous shuttles. So there, I would say that's where we got the best engagement, and where we will. So things will be put together, and we may read what people found. For example, also with other road users, so not only the passengers, but also other cars and bicycles interacting with the shuttles. These have been really collected on a more qualitative way, but still extremely interesting to understand how this type of technology is perceived by the public.
Yeah. And Nick, you want to say something about this?
Yeah, I was going to ask, Henriette, driving is one task performed by a human driver as part of the bus driver role. So I wondered what you learned about the non-driving tasks and how they could be managed if the driving task is being taken by an automated system.
You mean the challenges of the non-driving task?
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah. How do you fulfill that, like passenger welfare and security and those kind of things?
Yes, it's extremely central in all the discussions around removing the safety driver, as we said, because on one side, all the entire business model for public transport rely on removing the safety driver. If you don't remove the safety driver, you don't need this type of technology, and you can stay with an on-demand, classic on-demand, demand responsive transport service. So we need to remove the safety driver to have this, to unlock the business model for the technology. But yes, when you do that, you lose all the service interactions, the safety aspects. So we address that on different way. One way would be, again, technology. So I'm not saying technology will solve it all, but I think it can support. For example, we investigate in some of the sites AI detection, so camera detection through AI that can recognize kind of agitated behaviors. That could be fights, or it can recognize also when, for example, a backpack has been forgotten in the vehicle. So there's some tools that can support. Of course, we need a good interface with the central, so to say, with field operators, because there will be, as you said, as the title of the study say, there will be still human in the loop, even if they are not inside the vehicle. But indeed, I personally think the goal is not to remove the driver all the time. And for people with very specific needs, there will be still needs for humans. This I stay absolutely convinced, and I will never say that we should send a robot to catch up people with extremely challenging mobility needs or cognitive needs or whatever. There's a human will be still needed. So it's about finding the balance between all that.
Thank you, Henriette. We have questions also from the audience, and I have an interesting one that maybe it's for Natasha, if you can. How best to inform and get opinions from the public on autonomous vehicles? So especially if they know a little about this subject. So how can we get these opinions?
I'll do my best, but I'm happy for others to contribute as well. So I think, this sort of thing is exactly what we need more of, which is, actual hands-on experience. So there is a difference between acceptance and acceptability. And, I think what people think the vehicles can and cannot do and what they actually can and cannot do are very different. We're in a situation where there's a lot of information for those who are interested online in news stories, etc., about capabilities or not. So I think I always use the term managing expectations. So really getting a feel for what the system does and doesn't do, can and cannot do. And the only way we can do that is with this hands-on experience. But of course, the issue is that they're still very much in the prototype side of things. So they're not what you are going to be able to use tomorrow necessarily. So I was interested, actually, I wanted to ask Henriette about especially the speed at which these vehicles go. So the the vehicles that Henrietta is describing are what we tested in the City Mobile 2 project, and I'm very happy to see one of our colleagues from that project is actually online, and he's emailed me, so hello to you. And one of the things that we noticed was that they went at quite a low speed for safety reasons. And so that was something that everyone mentioned was an issue. And yes, it's lovely, it's fun, but it's not a practical option for getting from A to B. And then now I'm noticing the other angle, which is how they interact with other road users. So we have a very different setup in Europe compared to the US. But nevertheless, it was interesting, for example, to see the Waymo vehicle, which was going at a decent speed of about 25 miles an hour. And when I was in the passenger seat, being sort of testing it or being shown what it does, we had a couple of teenagers in the front of the vehicle. They can identify a Waymo and they know that the Waymo will not hit them. So they were basically in front of the vehicle, walking very, very slowly on the main road. And there's nothing that the vehicle would do. Another driver would have just beeped and pushed the gas down and made the teenagers scare it and go away. So that kind of interaction of really realization, but do we want, we want the public to see that, to kind of therefore manage their expectations of what is and is not possible now. The more real stuff they can see, the more they will basically, hopefully, not take advantage and use it sensibly, so to speak. I hope that's answered the question.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. And I want to go back to your study, Nick. First, if you could define what digital commentary driving is, and how was the process of developing this digital commentary driving as a standardized technique for providing measures of safety performance for certification and ongoing monitoring of AVs? If you can elaborate.
Yes. Yeah. So digital commentary driving is a concept that was developed in work that I did for BSI, the British Standards Institution. And I did a preliminary project for them, and I reviewed all of the standards that they provided to see which ones might be relevant for use by connected and automated vehicles. So I reviewed 3,000 standards, took a long time. But it wasn't only to identify the useful ones, it was also to identify the gaps. So where could we develop new standards that would be useful for the industry? And the most important gap that was identified was a standardized approach for providing safety assurance for the operation of automated vehicles. So the follow-on project was to develop what that standard might look like. So we did a number of interviews with expert organizations. We reviewed documentation from Waymo, from NVIDIA, from Intel, Mobileye, RAND, Roadcraft. We really took a look across the spectrum of ways that you could assess the safety of automated vehicles, and came up with this idea that would combine the best of how we assess human driving with the way in which we assess the performance of a mobile robot. So human driving, if you're an expert driver, is assessed by this process called commentary driving. And in commentary driving, the human driver verbally describes what they're seeing and how they would react, how they will change their driving behavior in response to the hazards in the environment that they see before them. So I can see a speed limit is about to change. I'm going to slow down to that speed limit. I can see a pedestrian about to cross the road. I'm going to slow down to see if they cross. Those kind of things. And the assessor can see that you've seen all of the most important information to be able to drive safely. So that's commentary driving. To make that digital for automated vehicles, we're looking at data that the vehicle produces to show that it has seen everything that it needs to see in order to drive safely, and that it is going to adapt its driving behavior appropriately to those hazards that it has detected. And because every vehicle needs to have that information in order to drive safely, we don't think there's any kind of IP being compromised. We don't care how the vehicle has come to that information, what sensors it's used, what software stack it is used. We just want to know that it has that information and it's going to use it appropriately to drive safely. So that is what we call digital commentary driving, a stream of standardized data that tells you that the vehicle knows where it is, what it's seeing, and that it's going to drive safely in response to everything that it's seeing. So we've come up with the concept. We've proved it in simulation using open source automated vehicle software. What we need to do now is start to collect this same data, but from numerous manufacturers, to show that it is possible for data from, for example, a Waymo, a Cruise, an Oxa, a Wave, you know, name any manufacturer you like, that they can produce data in this standardized format, and we can use that to analyze the safety of their vehicles. And I think this is going to be a really important part of showing to the public that these vehicles operate safely, that they do understand their environment, and that they respond appropriately. And it's going to be a really important way for regulators to be able to understand that the vehicles are doing the right things at the right times. Now, you know, we all know the challenges that automated vehicle companies have faced over the last year in particular. And I think some of those challenges might have been avoided if they'd been able to share data about what their vehicles were seeing and doing, and regulators could have said whether they felt that was appropriate or not. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that this idea of digital commentary driving, or something similar to it, is going to be a necessary part of how we assure ourselves of safe operation of self-driving vehicles.
Thank you, Nick. Very interesting. Also, we mentioned managing expectations of people and managing the community expectations. Do you think that these expectations could impact the evolution of the technology? That technology providers are looking at it, and the expectations of the different communities could impact the development or the directions of the technology development. Yeah,
absolutely. I think what we'll need to, a task we'll need to address, everyone on this call, everyone listening, PAVE Europe, something we'll need to tackle is perceptions of safety. Because even if self-driving vehicles are, you know, markedly safer than human drivers, statistically, the types of collision they have might be really significant in the public's perception of the safety of those vehicles. So we'll need to make sure that, you know, the perceptions are aligned to the statistical performance of those vehicles. And when we allow them to be deployed in the real world, they're behaving in ways that people deem to be acceptable. And we need to have ways of monitoring and measuring that, so that we can build that trust from public as users of the vehicles, but also as non-users, people who just encounter them, pedestrians, cyclists, horse riders, you know, numerous different types of road user. They all need to be comfortable in the way these vehicles operate.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Henriette, I have also a few questions from the audience for you. One is quite interesting, and it's about transport authorities. What you mentioned about the deployment of autonomous vehicles in public transport in the cities, and the role of the transport authorities or local transport authorities are important. So the question is, how can we upskill local transport authorities so that they can identify the opportunities for the deployment and integration of autonomous vehicles into the transport needs of the city?
That's a tough question, if I may say, but very, very central in all the works that I've been doing these past years, and I hope continue doing, because public transport in general is facing a lot of challenges. So what after my several years I spent at UITP, I realized that they have a lot of, I would say, almost like other problems, so to say. There is, for example, the electrification of buses. They have a lot to think about, optimization of their costs on already like daily basis now, and so on. Also the workforces challenges. So it happens that at some meetings, which were not, in these bubbles that we have, experts working in the field of autonomous vehicles, where kind of I would not say everybody's convinced, but what I realized when I was interacting more with the UITP non-AV savvy person, that for them it's a bit overwhelming in terms of too much needs still to be done in terms of being interesting, and that's where education and this type of webinars is super interesting, so that cities can learn from each other, so that authorities can learn with each other. We have some authorities that are, I would say, bold enough, so to say, to take kind of the challenge, because it is a challenge and it's very expensive. It's still very expensive to do that. So they need to combine funding, and this is what, for example, what the city of Oslo is doing. They managed to combine funding from Europe, from the European Commission, also from Norway, from the city. They combine all the funding they can to experience and test these services, because that's the only way authorities can really learn, is learning by doing and seeing from the other cities what have worked, what have not worked. And we have a very good example also with the city of Hamburg, with Hamburger Hochbahn, that is collaborating with private stakeholders like Moja and Volkswagen. For me, this also, and they are talking about 10,000 AVs in 2030. So I love this type of ambitions. I would almost say whatever, if it happens or not in terms of exactly 10,000, I don't think that's the goal, but we need to see more of this bold and radical mindset around public transport, rather than the business of as usual, and going like making huge investment for things that will stay forever, like a metro line. But autonomous vehicles offer really these flexible opportunities to deploy services exactly to the needs that you have at a specific moment, so to say. So you have for example, an area, a suburban area that don't have a good access to public transport, and you could in the future deploy quickly AV there to serve and to bridge the gap that exists in public transport, rather than build a tram line, a metro line that is very, very heavy in terms of cost and infrastructure and so on. So that's where the shift has to happen, and you say upskill, but it's really like more understanding the benefits that this technology can offer in terms of flexibility, and also in terms of the workforces. I'm sure we will talk about that in a moment, but if I continue directly, it's this idea that we have this aging population. All the discussion I've heard at UITP, many countries face the problem of not finding bus drivers, and there also, and also the topic of cost, by the way. That's where autonomous vehicles are interesting, because they are you don't have as much burden on your workforce that you have with a bus line, let's say. You can also operate at night and not have this heavy shift on drivers to operate at night. So yeah, you can operate at schedules that are not that practical for bus driver. And something I wanted to mention on this aspect is also from learning that I had from Japan, talking with some operators there. They noticed that the people that apply to become either safety operators or being in the back end, more like on supervision, because this is central. We probably won't have time to talk about it in detail today, but supervision will be at the center of the competences needed to operate fleets of autonomous vehicles in the future. Many more women are applying, and young people, women are applying. So from the demographic, it changed very much which people are applying to this type of jobs. So that's I think that's something also positive for the future.
Thank you, Henriette. Indeed, you mentioned, or you already answered a question from the audience regarding the bus drivers and the potential threat they could have on their job. You also mentioned Hamburg, so I'm pleased to announce that the next virtual panel will be with Moja and the city of Hamburg, and we talk about that in February. There is also another question for you, Henriette, very quickly. I think this is coming, and it's about infrastructure. So what is the role of infrastructure, especially for safety and public transport as well, and if we need it, and what is the role, very quickly?
Yeah, I'll be very quick. From the physical infrastructure point of view, first, we need a good physical infrastructure, I would say, for all road users, not only AVs. We need lane markings, we need good, so it needs to be there anyway. So this should be maintained in any case. There is, on the physical infrastructure point of view, the topic of curb management. How do you deal with like this pickup and drop-off point? It's investigated in several projects, several cities think about it more on urban planning side. That I think we need to think about that. Again, not only for AVs, but also for all the ride-hailing services that exist, and where we can see more and more an appetite from the people for on-demand services. So this will come more and more, and public transport should also very much be aware of that and how to collaborate, how to work on the city with this type of services. And on the digital one, I mean, the hot topic currently is really the HD map and kind of who should do it, because now there are more the manufacturers themselves, the AV providers that are doing their own HD map. It costs tremendous amount of money to do this HD map, and they travel, they have to run miles and kilometers and all over the city to have this solid HD map. But is it necessary that each AV provider does it itself by each cities? So that's why there is some projects, for example, the Ultimo project, investigating the idea of having like a kind of a basis open HD map that the city actually could have. And this HD map could be used also to send, for example, the emergency aspects, the construction works. If something is if the road is blocked for whatever demonstration or exhibition that is happening, this could be updated real time in this HD map and sent to the autonomous vehicle providers and the services behind. It's a bit utopian right now because it doesn't exist so far, but that's why some projects look at that, and I'm looking forward to see how it could work and if AV providers would kind of trust this HD map, and how like it will be all a matter of being updated and being real life to be really usable for the AV provider. So yes, there is a big need on digital infrastructure and collaboration between the different stakeholders on that.
Yeah. Thank you, Henriette. Natasha, I think you want to add on it.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the sort of driver's side of things. So I noticed during a visit to the US in the summer that there's definitely a difference between how the two regions are approaching this. So from the European side, you might not be surprised that we are going much more towards the public transport offer from automated vehicles, which is a good thing, rather than necessarily private vehicles. But at the same time, I'm also noticing another good thing, which is a change in the way we think about these. So I've mentioned the City Mobile project more than once, and back in 2006 or whenever it was, there was a request from myself and a colleague to look at pedestrians and users of the shuttles. And we were told, oh, but you know, there is no need for people because it's all about the technology now. We just need to test the technology. And I'm really happy that the mindset has changed to realize that the technology in itself might be okay in a lab or whatever, but then when you get it in the cities and look at what else it needs to interact with, that's when the challenges start. So I think we're in a new era where, for example, it's not, we know that there's not enough drivers of buses. COVID made some difference somewhere, and people don't want to do that anymore. Fair enough. But to say, okay, then let's have automated vehicles as a sort of replacement is not quite right, because we still need people to get your disabled person to the automated vehicle until they can find a different way to do it, or we need someone remotely to understand what it is that they need to do. So there's lots of, so we're changing the employment and the sort of the way that people work. We're not just getting rid of bus drivers, we're creating a new kind of personnel, and we need to understand, how do we train those people? What do they need to see? What do they not need to see? So I don't think for a very long time people are just gonna go away. So they're just gonna have different roles. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. That's very important to remark. we are almost at the end. Unfortunately, I just want to ask to all of you your final remarks on the discussion that we had and what could be the future trends. There is also a question from the audience. It's quite interesting because it says, should we or the community or invest on research and development of autonomous vehicles, or we just should put it aside and continue to work on the traditional transport?
I can maybe start on that one, Guido.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it needs to be proportionate to the benefit that we believe there to be. And you know, I think all of us on the call, all of us listening, believe that there is huge potential benefit to the deployment of automated vehicles. But the evidence is a bit thin at the moment. We need to build that evidence case. And until that evidence case is there, I think, you know, the balance of investment needs to be making sure the existing transport network is as good as it can be for human users. And as the evidence builds for the value of automated vehicles, then we can shift to investment that supports the deployment of AVs. So, yeah, I think there's a balancing act proportionate around, you know, apportioning investment according to the benefits that we know can be delivered. In terms of what I'm kind of looking forward to, the UK has been doing some good work in terms of regulation over the last few years. And there was a draft automated vehicles bill that was announced at the opening of Parliament at the back end of last year. So that's going through the kind of regulatory procedures, development procedures at the moment. And associated with that bill, there will be a statement of safety principles. There's going to be a statement about the level of safety performance that will be expected of self-driving vehicles, and a statement around equality and fairness. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what that says and helping government develop what those principles should be.
Thank you, Nick. Henriette?
From my side, yeah, like with it goes in all the work I've done before, and I agree fully with Natasha with the fact that we are doing in Europe it really much under public transport, and that AVs are embedded within this mentality. I remember also from my work in Singapore, there was a bit kind of a mental model of people there as well, that the technology should be used for the community rather than this individual kind of private cars. But for me, so what's to come and the need for further research. So yes, of course, we need to further research and investigate. Not only that, but all the area we need. City needs to understand, as Nick said, better what it can bring. What I would like to see more and more is kind of demand from the cities. So, for example, I've been contacted many times at UITP from cities that ask me, okay, what are the benefits of this technology and how much does it cost? How much does it cost? Where can I find vehicles and so on? So what I would like to see, and that's something I'll be very happy to work on, is having cities asking, making their requirements, telling the industry, we need such vehicles. We need vehicles with such speed, with this type of speed, with this type of course, with maximum safety. We need that number of vehicles and so on. Because what I could see when I talked to, on the other side, to the shuttle manufacturers or AV providers, they didn't know, they kind of didn't know how much vehicles they need to plan and manufacture and so on. So there is kind of a hesitation now in terms of manufacturing, not knowing if these vehicles will be bought and leased and so on. So I would like to see from the cities really a call, and that's why these 10,000 vehicles by Hamburg are fantastic, because it creates really stimulation from the shuttle providers to say, okay, we need to deliver and so on. And the big excitement for me is really on some collaborations that are coming. I've heard, for example, EasyMile and Renault collaborate on new platform. So you would have on one side a vehicle that is really like series manufactured by Renault, but with the technology of EasyMile on top of it. For me, that's a fantastic partnerships that I would like to see more. And same, if cities say in advance, oh, that's interesting, I would like to have like 50 of them in 5 years, they could start planning and scaling and with the scaling, they can test, and with testing, they get better understanding, and so on and so on. Of course, all the topic of incident responses needs to be discussed. So Cruise was a great, like, as everybody woke up, I have the impression, with this, how to deal with an incident, how to report this data sharing aspect. This needs to be continuously discussed and resolved, I would say, sooner as later, to be sure that if there is an incident, we know how to deal with. I'm trustful into also the public transport operators that we have in Europe, that they are already, as I mentioned, with this supervision is kind of part of it to deal with these incident responses, and that they will have protocol in place to really ensure to the cities that everything is there, and if there is an issue, it will be dealt correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Henriette. And Natasha.
So yeah, I mean, I think they're here and they're staying, so to speak, and the development is happening, and there's different. It's the most disruptive I think we've ever seen transport for the last sort of 15-20 years. At the end of the day, if programs like this, where they're looking at public acceptance and engagement, don't exist, maybe they won't be used. So we really have a responsibility to make sure that they are developed for what we want as people. Public, you, me, what do we want to get? How do we want to get to from A to B? And things like sustainability and transport emissions, all of that needs to be taken into account. In the immediate future, I'm not an expert on infrastructure, but I am do have some understanding as an expert of people. And I think we are in a situation where, infrastructure aside, we have a situation where people are getting very distracted and very inattentive, because there's so much going on in our minds, on our cars, in our phones. So the immediate, from the safety point of view, is trying to understand how we can manage that. And I'm not saying that highly automated vehicles are going to remove all crashes. I am not one of those people who says 95% of crashes are human error, because it depends. But until we get to a point where they can be as a good driver as we want them to be, that journey, we need to understand what it is that we can stop people from being distracted, inattentive, etc. So for me, that's more of an issue immediately. And we've got 2 minutes, so I'll shut up.
That's great. Thanks a lot. Thank you, all of you. It was very insightful. Unfortunately, our time is up, but I would really like to thank you, Henriette, Nick, Natasha, for joining this very interesting conversation today. You are recorded, so this our conversation will be available on our YouTube channel and also in the Pavecast. So for those who couldn't join today, they will have the opportunity to listen to you. And again, thank you all for joining us today, and looking forward to see you next time. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Guido.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.